So yeah, I just don't know where Luke's gotten to actually.
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Hey, where have you been?
We've had a production incident.
Really?
Yeah, been fixing this bug. It's taken ages. What are you waiting here for?
Well, I'm waiting for the slides. I thought you had gone and got them over the other side of Cardiff.
Oh, I thought we were here for Oktoberfest.
No, no, mate. Look at them. They're waiting for us to talk about async architectures.
Well, I haven't had time to do the slides. I've been fixing this bug.
Really?
Yeah, the test didn't catch it. Took us ages to debug. We had 10, 11 alarms going off all over the shop.
Oh,
and then
no.
it took us ages to get the fix
what are we
in.
going to talk about here?
Well, I don't know, because I need your help. Is it all right if I just show you this quickly and try and help me? Because I can't have this happening again, these production incidents.
Is that all right with everyone if we do that?
Come on, help me out a little bit. And then we'll get on to the talk
We'll
after
help
that.
Luke out.
Yeah? Is that all right?
Right.
All right, let me just get the architecture up. Right, this is the problematic system here. And as I said, yeah, testing catch this bug. We had a nightmare debugging it, and then the delivery pipeline took so long because the tests are flaky. Couldn't get the fix in.
Right. So take a step back. What is this system? What is it doing?
Well, it's a good question, Sarah. I'm glad you asked that. This is our payment system. It's pretty important. If this isn't working, we're not getting paid. Customers aren't able to get their orders in. It's an API gateway, Lambda function in behind that, our third party, which is providing the payments, payment services, synchronous response back to our front end, and then we've got a little asynchronous process out the back of that with some persistence. But we're having a devil of a time with it.
Okay. And so what have you got in place at the moment to try and prevent these bugs? And because it sounds like you've had an absolute nightmare.
I thought we were fine. We've got this massive end-to-end test. Test the whole system, one end to the other. Test the happy path, a couple of the error paths.
Right. And how are you actually carrying out that test? What's going on kind of in your deployment pipeline?
We hit the endpoint. We connect to the third party's test environment. We assert that things are landing in EventBridge. We've got a bit of extra infrastructure there to do that, just in our test environments. And then we're making sure the Lambda functions are running. And then finally, we make sure the record's going to DynamoDB.
Okay, so when the test fails, you must be finding it quite hard to figure out where the problem lies, right? Because all you know is that the endpoint is failing. You don't know where in the system the problem lies, right?
We don't know. So it is definitely a bit of a obscure box. That's my architecture diagram.
This really is a bit of a mess. This is,
from
Luke.
bad to
Come
worse
on.
here, isn't it?
You need to sort out the slides.
Okay, here we go. We're back on track.
So coming off the back of this, is this all one big service, or is this split up?
It's
What
two services.
Two services.
It's two services. That's the default event bus in there. So that's not technically in the service, but we've got the API in one service. We've got the asynchronous bit in another service. Deploying them separately. But we're testing it as a whole.
You're testing it as a whole, and you're deploying both services in order to just carry out this one test.
Yeah.
And how long's that taking? How long's that adding to your deployment pipeline?
Put it this way, I can go off, make a cup of tea, let the kettle boil, let the bag brew for 4 to 5 minutes for perfect Earl Grey. I'm back at my desk, and it's still going. So
I'm go to the toilet, I guess.
Yeah, 15, 20 minutes. But the problem is the third party's test environment's flaky.
Right.
So sometimes that will give us false negatives. We'll essentially just have to rerun the test and hope it passes next time.
Okay, so where I suggest we start with this is like, which parts are your like critical paths? Because in general, I think we don't want to be deploying all of these different services, taking up all this time in the pipeline, because we'll come on to this a bit later, that I'm going to kind of plant the seed early that we shouldn't be doing these long-running tests at the expense of our recovery. So I imagine that when all this went down, reverting or fixing forward took forever because of the deployment pipeline. So let's think about, what's the critical path here? What's going to block the customer journey?
Okay, I see what you're saying, sir. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense. So I suppose the critical path is what we're seeing on the left-hand side. That's the bit that absolutely can't fail. It's time sensitive. Stop going to sleep. That's the bit that absolutely can't fail. We need to make sure we're responding. We don't really have any option to retry because we've got customers on a front-end page waiting for their response. We need to respond as quickly as possible and immediately. So that is definitely the critical path. I see what you're saying, because when I was looking at this before, I thought the whole thing was critical, but that's the only part that the customer's in. The asynchronous part on the right-hand side, the customer's gone. We've got a little bit more scope for retries there, I would say.
Okay, so let's start off on the left-hand side where we've got the most critical path. What would you say? I'd say where we want to start is taking a step back from what tests are we going to put in. What failure modes do you see? Like, where can things go wrong?
Yeah, that is a really good point. So if we break it down a little bit, I guess at a high level, the API gateway could be down or misconfigured. You know, maybe we've knocked out the authorization scopes. That could definitely go wrong. That connection from API gateway to Lambda function, we could have misconfigured that. The Lambda function might not exist, I guess. Inside there, that code's making it's doing a bit of validation on the input. I suppose that could have a bug in it. We're making an API request out to the third party. A lot could go wrong there because we're obviously using API credentials. We're making an API request there. The body could be malformed. The network could be down.
And as you saw in I know that in production incidents before, we've had like client secrets just in production kind of expire, and the tests haven't caught that, right? So
yeah,
because we're testing in these lower environments, so tests can't necessarily catch everything, right? So a few more failure modes that I'm seeing is API gateway could throttle, and we can't necessarily test for that. And then we've also got potentially, different IAM roles, particularly between Lambda putting onto Event Bridge and API gateway triggering Lambda. And where I kind of want to start is where's the least overhead. So I'm thinking, which kind of tests can we put in place that doesn't take long to run and we can just get quick value from?
Oh, so we're saying this end-to-end test is not serving as well. I thought
Yeah,
it was bulletproof.
I'm saying that it's taking so long to run. You're deploying everything. There's also separate, like who even owns the test, because if two different teams own these two different services, then it's hard to know who actually has control of that test, and you're just haltering your road to recovery. I'm
with you. So we've got 0 unit tests in there right now. Do you think we need to increase those unit tests, right? What 100%. I'm seeing here, we could unit test the business logic in both of those Lambda functions.
Right. At not much expense at all.
And not much expense at all.
It runs like super quickly, so that's where I'd be starting.
Okay, I'm with you. And part of our bug today was actually that API gateway didn't have permission to call the Lambda function.
Oh, really?
So it was an IAM, partly an IAM bug.
Well, so a few years ago, I probably would have said we should be integration testing this thing, like to begin with, go for deploying the microservice, checking that it ends up on the event bridge, and then you know that things are okay, and or check that the data has landed in the third party by interrogating that. But recently, what I've been trying out is actually just unit testing the infrastructure. So if you've got your kind of infrastructure as code and you take the template that it produces out of that and just unit test that the IAM roles are correct, and that's just super quick.
And I can do that without deploying the whole...
Exactly,
whole,
yeah,
wow.
super quick.
Okay. Okay.
I'd say it's like not necessarily quite as effective in terms of the problem that can happen is that developers might kind of just change the unit test to make it fit the scenario, but that's kind of more on training and things. And I think when, maybe if it is in the critical path, maybe we will go for an integration test. But I just think first off, chuck these unit tests in, the infrastructure tests.
I see. So we want to almost be testing as far as possible without deploying any infrastructure, any resources. Because
Exactly.
I see what you're saying now. That's really what slows us down. The test itself takes a long time, but just deploying that infrastructure, that's a massive overhead for us.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But say, let's kind of stick in on this critical path, because it is really critical to our service. Maybe we do want to consider an integration test, or some might call it kind of an end-to-end test of that service. Cool. But you were saying that you're having this like flaky issue with the third party, so tell us a bit more about that.
Just because we're in our test, we're connected to the test environment, and there's obviously not the same guarantees there. So maybe we get more longer response times from that third party, which means that we get timeouts in our Lambda function. And that's why we have to rerun the test. Or sometimes, like, something's just broken in the test environment. It's causing us to get error responses when we wouldn't normally. But another problem we had, I'm really realizing that this system is quite buggy. No one tell my manager. We misconfigured the API key in the live environment.
Right.
And of course, like, our test didn't catch it.
Right.
So now I'm thinking, okay, we've increased our unit tests. We've got an integration test for a bit more safety on the critical path. But these bugs are still going to slip through, right? We can't fully replicate the live environment and all the different things that might happen there.
Yeah, so like, no matter how many tests you have, the bugs are always going to slip through, and I think there is this kind of danger of just over-testing our entire system. So I think we need to take a bit more of a holistic approach of the entire system and think about how can we roll back quickly when the bugs do get in? Like, how can our system be super resilient? So let's say that we have misconfigured this API key. How are we going to know about it ASAP and sort this issue out?
Alarms. We've got loads of alarms, but almost that was part of our problem today. We had alarms that were going off. They were telling us that there was loads of things wrong, but we had like 10, 11, 12 alarms, and that kind of really complicated the debugging process. I feel like maybe we could consolidate those alarms into one thing.
Right.
Maybe CloudWatch composite alarms would be good, and then we could just have one alarm that goes off, tells us, hey, there's a problem with your critical service, and that's the one. If that goes off, we know we need to listen to it.
Yeah, it's a great idea, because I have noticed that you guys have been kind of ignoring all these alarms coming in, and it's just super noisy, this echo chamber on Teams. So,
super noisy.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that using these composite alarms, you can kind of bring all of these alarms into one and just say, pay service is having a problem, and then figure it out. And so people become a bit more receptive to the alarms that are coming in. So let's say that we stick an alarm on the API gateway. We can also do the same thing for the throttling as well. See if that's having issues. And so with the third party, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, and we can say we can cover with unit tests the connection to the third party in terms of the body and things like that we're sending there. But at first I was thinking we could write an integration test that can interrogate this third party, but apparently there's sometimes when it takes a few minutes to actually kind of show up in the third party, and that's kind of causing us problems. So what do you think about us kind of mocking the third party?
I think that could be a good idea, because I think as well the request, the API request we're making to third party is fully typed. So we've already got a little bit of safety around that. We know if we send this request in this way to this API endpoint, we should get a response. That's almost our contract, right, with the third party. That's the agreement that we have in place technically. So I feel like we can get a certain level of safety just from that. And at the end of the day, just hitting the test environment, we've shown that that doesn't prove that we can actually hit the live environment in a safe way.
Yeah.
Now I'm also thinking about the asynchronous process here, and I almost feel, and now I'm seeing what you're saying about critical and non-critical paths, and I wonder if we actually reduce the test coverage in the asynchronous. And I'm thinking, because we got more of an opportunity there to retry requests.
Exactly, and I think there's like some key things missing in this architecture. So although, yeah, we could do this integration test where we put an event onto the event bridge and then check that it's ended up in Dynamo, but there's more we can do here just to prevent the bugs in the first place. So right now, I can see you probably made this assumption that if the Lambda or the Dynamo fails, the event bridge is going to retry it for you. But the event bridge is actually only going to retry in the scenario that the Lambda has just rejected the request in the first place. So you're losing, you're not capturing these errors. And we should be relying in this asynchronous process that the customer isn't waiting on. We should be relying on retries. So what do you think we could kind of add in here to sort this out?
DLQ.
That's right, Luke.
Nailed it. I'm getting there. DLQ.
Where are you going to put it?
Do you know what? I'm going to say I need two DLQs. I need a DLQ on event bridge to catch what you're saying, the invocation failures, and then I need a DLQ on the Lambda itself to catch those execution failures.
Exactly.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah, so you can have, like, you can use the failure destinations of the Lambda for if Dynamo is throttling or whatever, or there's some issue in the Lambda, just put those on the DLQ and then we can investigate and redrive them. But all of, that kind of async process shouldn't be waking people up in the night necessarily, because the customer doesn't really need to know in these like next few minutes. We should only be kind of like raising huge alarms like on the left-hand side. So these DLQs are going to sort us out.
Well, look, this has been. Thank you guys for allowing us to take this time. Sorry, it's gone on a little bit longer there.
Are you going to bring the slides later?
Yeah, I might have to come back next year. We'll do it. Should we just do it in a year's time? I'll have them ready by then. But look, I'm not going to be too hard on myself, right? Like, yeah, these bugs are going through, but this is a fairly new system. It was a bit of a refactor, so we're still learning how this thing behaves, and I think that's what this is about. It's evolving our testing strategy and our approach to reliability as we go along. So I won't be too hard on myself, although Sarah's done a very good job of picking a lot of holes in that architecture. I've actually got a quote for you, Sarah.
Oh.
I think you'll like this one.
How the tables have turned.
Yeah. No, I've just remembered that I've got this from our good friend Mr. Dykstra. He said program testing can be used to show the presence of bugs, but never to show their absence. And I feel like bugs are inevitable. Like, I've been trying to catch all the bugs. I don't want any bugs in production. But what I'm realizing is that bugs are inevitable. They will go through. But almost as long as we catch those bugs, fix them quickly.
Yeah, and I think jokes aside, if we move to the next slide.
There's another.
Me and Luke, we work together, and I think that what we've been kind of coming to the conclusion over the last couple of years is, rather than moving from this mindset of, and what we kind of would like people to kind of walk away with what me and Luke are calling kind of hot takes, is like not to just rely on these end-to-end tests, and not to just resort to panicking about testing and trying to prevent every single bug that goes in, and just try to balance these things out. So this kind of square of balance is saying, don't over-test at the expense of having like poor delivery and poor recovery, and also invest heavily in your observability and just kind of balance these things out with alerts and alarms. So if a test is taking you a week to write, or it's taking forever in your CI/CD pipeline, kind of think about it and think, do we actually need that? Can we kind of catch this? Can we use like canary deployments to have alarms to roll back quickly? And so, yeah, I don't know whether you want to add to that, Luke.
Yeah. I think that this is it. So the square of balance is a way to look holistically at reliability. You know, traditionally we might have, just thought reliability was all about tests, making sure we limit we catch problems before they reach production. But having that realization that that's impossible to catch all of those bugs, that shifts your mindset a little bit. And I think the square of balance is a really good framework to have in the back of your mind as you're improving the reliability of your systems. Of course, it's not saying don't test, but it's saying don't just test.
Yeah.
And I think with an asynchronous architecture, you know, what we've come here today to look at is that can be difficult, or it's perceived as being difficult, but it doesn't have to be, right? It can actually be an opportunity because you've got more chance to recover and be fault tolerant. Lean into that, right? Use that to your advantage. So, yeah, reduce that test coverage, but replace it with your recovery strategies like your DLQs. Replace it with good observability like composite alarms and tracing, so that when those bugs inevitably do get into production, you catch them as quickly as possible. You can debug them really quickly because you can pinpoint them more accurately. If possible, you're recovering from those bugs anyway. You're not suffering from any message or data loss. And super importantly, because you've kind of concentrated your test coverage, now your delivery pipelines are fast again. So you've caught the bug, but you can fix it super quick and move on with your
100%. With that, I think we're ready for a beer, aren't we?
Yeah, let's go to Oktoberfest. All right, thank you so much, guys.
Nice.